Welcome to those of you who are joining us.
Hello and happy June. Welcome.
I see some familiar names. Lots of people jumping on. Good evening to those of you who are in a time zone where there is evening. Good afternoon if you're closer to me.
And if you can join in the chat and let us know your name, your role, and where you're joining from, it'll give us even a little bit more information. Hey, Judy from Maine.
Hi, Judy. Massachusetts, Alabama, Omaha, all over as usual.
Las Vegas sounds hot, Stacy. You're not sure, Sharon. Pink slip, first grade teacher. That doesn't look like a happy face.
No.
Must mean there's something else out there. Oh, I'm so sorry, Sharon. Well, there's definitely a need for teachers everywhere. So definitely that means there's other opportunities for you. I'm heading to New Hampshire next week, Anne.
Okay. Utah, California.
A little earlier out there.
Some people making some connections. It's great.
Nashaw, I think is how you say it. Is that how you say it, Anne? Nashaw, New Hampshire? First to fourth grade math teacher. That's a range. Okay.
All right. It is 7 o'clock Eastern. We will go ahead and get started. I'm sure there will be a few people coming in. If you haven't already, take a minute and read our message on the screen. We've got people from all different grade levels, some administrators. Welcome, welcome. And there we go. So welcome. Today, we are going to be talking about elements of effective professional development. And professional learning or professional development, those terms can be used interchangeably, is beneficial for both educators and students, as I'm sure we all know. And we also know that we want to nurture classrooms and schools that foster a sense of safety, belonging, and fun. And so in this webinar, we're going to explore elements of effective professional development, as well as associated responsive classroom practices. So we'll be looking at a little bit about what we do in responsive classroom that's effective, what you can do in your schools that is effective. But before we jump into that, we will introduce ourselves. So my name is Kate Conway. I am a curriculum and instructional designer for Responsive Classroom with a focus on leadership. My career in education spans over about 25 years now, as well as all divisions of elementary, middle, and high school. I've taught in the United States and abroad. and I spent 13 years as the assistant head of school at an international school in California, and most recently served as a head of an independent school here in Hawaii, where I am located. I love working for Responsive Classroom because I truly believe in it. And my little nugget of trivia is that I actually went to the Greenfield Center School, where the Northeast Foundation for Children, which was the origin of Responsive Classroom, had their lab school. So some of my teachers were the original writers of all of these amazing books and this whole wonderful organization that we love. And I am delighted to be here tonight with my colleague Margie, who is an amazing person and educator, and I will let her tell you a little bit about herself.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everybody. My name is Margie Dorhorst. I'm also a consulting teacher for Responsive Classroom and a curriculum instructional designer. And Kate and I collaborate on the work that we're doing with leadership with Responsive Classroom. I don't have as clever of an origin story as Kate. I'm just always amazed by anybody who got brought up in the approach, but then to be educated in the approach is really amazing. My history as an educator is I live in Wisconsin, and that's where I spent my time as an educator. I was a speech and language pathologist, a gifted and talented educator, and an elementary principal. I learned the approach Responsive Classroom when I was a speech and language pathologist, so got a chance to use Responsive Classroom in a lot of different settings, and then led the school where I had been an educator as the principal for 16 years, implementing Responsive Classroom school-wide. So definitely get to see how the approach can change kids' lives, can change educators' lives, and really impact a family and a community. So as we share tonight with you the effectiveness of professional development, both Kate and I as school leaders have had the opportunity to use the approach to teach adults as well as lead a school with the approach. And I'm still in Wisconsin, not quite as adventurous as Kate, but I do love getting to travel with Responsive Classroom all around the country and even internationally when an opportunity arises.
Oops.
I have to say,
Yeah,
welcome.
I'm moving the slides here. There we go.
And I'm just like, because the chat's still popping up, like, welcome Gloria from Hong Kong. That's actually the other side of the world. So I'm impressed and I'm glad you're here. You may or may not be familiar with our Responsive Classroom webinars. We've been running a series throughout the year of 3 different broad topics. This topic being closing the year with joy. And this series has 4 monthly webinars. So thank you for signing up. It's a busy time of year for everybody. I know school years are closing and summers are beginning, and that's incredible. But to take part in a webinar, it's important that you get the best experience with us. So if you're having some bandwidth problems, which you might find on my end if things freeze up, that it helps if you can go in your computer and close out any other programs and browsers that will maximize your bandwidth. We've also found it helps to exit and re-enter if you get a lag. And we found that any way that you can have other people kind of not use your bandwidth in the house, that helps as well, assuming you're at your house. We also want to make this as interactive as possible, although a webinar tends to be more direct. So I'm going to encourage you to use both the Q&A feature and the chat feature. The Q&A feature will be interactive in that you can send hosts and panelists a question, and that with that, we will respond to your question if it has to do with logistics or anything else like that that might be helpful, especially if there's a problem going on your end. And we'll ask for the chat feature to be used to send to everyone on the chat. That way you can connect with us and make comments, read other people's comments. They also get recorded, and that'll help us to capture what you're seeing as well. We do know that a number of people have a lot of other things going on, so a recording of this webinar is sent to anyone who signs up and you will receive a recording in your email in a few days.
Great. Thank you, Margie. So we'll take just a minute for you each to read the learning goals for this webinar. And as you read them, try to think of a goal for your focus this evening. Which of these learning goals really resonates with you? What aspect of those learning goals would you like to focus upon as we go through this webinar? You could jot that down on a sticky or just hold it in your head, or maybe on another piece of paper somewhere else if you're trying to use fewer stickies. So hopefully you have a pen nearby. I should have said that in the beginning, that you will want a pen and some paper as we go through this, or maybe your notes section open on your computer. And the first activity that we'd like to do is to have you just reflect a little bit. And I always like to try to connect with our past as we look into what we're presently doing and how we can do that better in the future. So what professional development have you found most valuable? Can you think of a specific time, a specific professional development that jumps out in your memory as being very valuable? For example, when I was, maybe 5 or 6 years into my teaching journey, I did a workshop that was about teaching history, but I still remember it because there was ample time given for us to connect with our lived experiences, with our own lives, our own values, as well as with one another who were participating in that. And so it helped me grow both professionally and personally and connected to my personal life. So maybe you can think of something and jot it down. And then actually, if you're willing to share, and it's challenge by choice, you could jot it into the chat box and share with everybody a very little brief summary of a professional development that really impacted you. And you don't have to get specific, but is there something about it that you really thought was really invigorating or important in some way? Thank you, Judy, for sharing. Marianne. Already there's quite a variety. Lovely to see some of the responsive classroom workshops in there. That's great. Thank you. Oh yeah, Light My Fire was right at the time when everybody needed a lit fire. Opportunities to talk, converse, reflect. So many of these are really very related to your daily life in the classroom, at your schools, what you're doing. Connecting. Great. So as you continue to jot a few ideas down in the chat, if you would, we'll talk a little bit about fun, significance, and belonging. So social science theory and research by Maslow, Dreikurs, Adler, and others confirm that all human behavior is motivated to meet the needs of belonging, significance, and fun. And probably some of these amazing experiences that you're all mentioning in the chat had some connection to at least one of those pieces. Meaningful professional development generally makes you feel significant in some way. Perhaps it meets your needs for belonging because you feel that who you are is being recognized. Perhaps it meets your need for significance because you see how that can be immediately transferred in your role as a teacher or an administrator for whom you're working with. And there were some examples in here of people who were having fun, who had to stand up on a Zoom meeting and yell, or really engage with each other and think deeply. And as we know, that is a great way to have fun as well. So responsive classroom professional development meets learners' needs in these three ways, and does so largely through the idea of embedding characteristics of engaged academics. And those of you who are familiar with responsive classroom know that that is one of the 4 domains of responsive classroom is engaged academics. So we'll be talking about that a little bit right now. So the characteristics of engaging academics per responsive classroom are key in professional development. And just as these same elements allow learners of any age to do their best learning, they support engaging professional development. So learning should be active. We should provide opportunities for learners to do, to practice, to explore, to plan. So giving participants in a workshop or in a professional development opportunities to work through scenarios, or giving them graphic organizers on which to plan or outline the task at hand or something in the future based on what they're learning, gets them active, as does active text analysis or participating in a graffiti learning structure, just to name a few. Interactive also connects to those that are active, but it's also about giving learners the opportunity to talk with one another about their learning. And interacting with others enhances cognitive growth. As we say in responsive classroom, in our guiding principle number 3, great cognitive growth occurs through social interaction. And so for learners to benefit best, they need time to discuss their learning. And for professionals in education, that would be done in grade level groups or subject specific teams or focus groups that have a particular purpose, as well as a possibility of envisioning their work through role plays is another example or idea. Purposeful, meaning that lessons should be designed around learning objectives. We do that, we all do that for our students. We should do that for professional development opportunities as well, so that the learning is meaningful and purposeful, and so that the participants see that meaning and that purpose. Professional development leaders help learners see this purpose so that the learning is meaningful. So if you are being the one to offer professional learning, it's very important, and it is your job to make sure that those participants are seeing the meaning. One way to do that is to give them tangible and immediate useful strategies. We love to give you something that you can take back to your classroom, back to your school, and use right away, and see how what you have learned impacts your students. So the same thing, if you're leading a professional development, how is it impacting the teachers? How is that impacting their students? How does it impact the school as a whole or the classroom? Ensuring that it's appropriately challenging is also key. And we know this again for students. We talk about the zone of proximal development and making sure that students are appropriately challenged without being too far challenged. And one of the ways that we can do this is through effective questioning techniques, posing a variety of questions, encouraging learner questioning, asking about connections, why they came to that conclusion, how this knowledge will impact their teaching, how their teaching will push them to think about learning on a greater scale, all of these. And I see somebody writing in, ready, do, done, read the room. So also connected to their interests. We want professional learning to be connected to what you're doing. How many of you have sat in professional development and felt that it was not relevant to you? And probably there's some required things that you have to sit through. But when you're designing a professional development experience, or when you are choosing one, you want to look for one that is going to give you some choice and some options whenever possible. So being able to split up by subject area or grade level or your responsibilities at a school allows learners to feel empowered and to direct the learning so that it's most appropriate for the individual, and allowing those personal connection time also gives a sense of significance. Any of you who've participated in responsive classroom know that we always start off, even with just, as Margie asked you in the very beginning, who are you? Where are you from? What grade level do you teach? Or what's your role at a school? And even just that begins to give a little bit of significance to people who are participating in a workshop. I led a few workshops that stick out in my mind as being some of the most invigorating ones for everybody, but especially me as a leader. And it was because each one was based around some sort of way to develop students' social and emotional or academics competencies, those skills, but we went through it as a team together. And that allowed us to grow and bond and share because we were practicing the activities and the experiences, the interactive learning structures that the students were going to be doing as well. And through that, we were really able to share in the same way that the students were, and created that positive community that makes it so significant. And lastly, structured with opportunities for autonomy. And again, here we know that opportunities for choice and promoting learners in being autonomous and expressing themselves, to see themselves as capable learners with a stake in their learning, that improves their confidence, their persistence, and their productivity. So choosing, for example, to read an article where the participants get to choose which article they're reading and become an expert and then share that back with their group, or choosing an area to dive into and figure out how the topic at hand applies to that. And again, come back and share in that waterfall way that we do as an interactive learning structure, allows them to have that moment to be an expert and to have some choice and to be autonomous. And we want to foster that in our students as well as the people that we're doing professional learning with. So there was a relatively recent study that came out in 2022 that was done by a collaboration between Harvard and Brown. And there's a reference slide at the end of the presentation if you're curious to look into that a little bit more. And they found that there were 6 best practices for professional learning, and that these best practices are really what anybody who's planning professional learning should make sure that they have involved in their professional learning. We can see that these are visible throughout responsive classroom professional development. And between looking at this list and hearing some of the examples, we hope that you then, if you're creating a professional development opportunity, would use these characteristics as well. So targeting instructional practices over content knowledge. Responsive classroom focuses on concrete instructional practices in all 4 domains of the approach. For prioritizing concrete materials for practice, responsive classroom provides planners, graphic organizers, and concrete approaches in all of our courses and workshops, and even online. If you haven't explored the website, there's things available for you now without even being a part of anything. Having follow-up meetings to address questions or concerns. So responsive classroom encourages schools and districts to train full groups of educators. It offers a leadership suite of resources and has a full line of quick coaching guides to follow up that can follow up a responsive classroom training with meetings and coaching. So one of the things we do as an organization is try to empower schools and teachers to coach each other, to coach within your school, to really become an expert or a responsive classroom educator certification so that you can lead that in your school. And I think that that is very much related to what they're talking about in the Harvard Brown study, because then you can lead follow-up meetings, you can address questions or concerns. And so that's something also to do in your own professional development. Focus on building relationships with students. So Responsive Classroom places this at the center of all professional learning. Each of the 4 domains that we are organized around leads back to the relationship that we're building with students. And I think any administrator who puts that relationship with students at the center will be able to get buy-in from teachers. Any teacher leader, anybody who's planning a professional development, if you can keep that relationship building at the center, people will be able to connect and see that purpose and see that meaning for what you're trying to do. That will all be very clear and a way for them to engage. And lastly, to rely on coaching. I spoke a little bit about this. Oh, no, I missed one. Sorry. Encourage peer collaboration around shared goals. So within responsive classroom professional learning, there are ample opportunities for collaboration, and it's a good practice and a model for how to use that in the classroom. So again, it's that idea of what we're doing with our students, we want to do with our teachers or our fellow teachers, we want to do in our groups of administrators, we want to do as a provider of professional development. So it's all about modeling what we're doing and experiencing those structures so that we all understand what that student experience is and build those relationships. So now, lastly, relying on coaching, we really encourage teachers to become certified responsive classroom educators to be able to provide coaching at their own schools. And we encourage people to take a variety of workshops so that they can come back and be experts about these areas at their schools. So you can also do that in your own professional development that you're providing, is encourage different people who are involved in providing professional development to become the experts in that area and then be able to coach people on it. Make sure I don't lose my mouse here. Before we move on actually to these learning forward standards, there are just a couple. I was browsing through some testimonials the other day, and there a couple of them stuck out to me in relation to this webinar. And a participant named Ernest in 2020 said about the workshop that he attended that it was exhilarating, informative, and well worth attending. And another attendee, Kristen, said, detailed, reflective, collaborative, and transparent. And I felt that those are all adjectives that we would all strive for in any professional development. So even just reading those, you don't need a whole webinar for it. You could just look at those adjectives, and that's really the goal. That's what you want people to be experiencing. And you do so through these interactive structures that we're talking about and some of the responsive classroom practices that I'll get to in just a few minutes. So also, before we move on, let's just take a minute to engage here with each other. What is a characteristic that has resonated with you for professional development that is effective? So something either that's a responsive classroom or that is from the Harvard Brown study. Is there something in this last few minutes that we've been talking about that resonated with you that feels like would be effective professional development? Share in the chat when you get a chance, and make sure it's set to everyone so that we can all see. Sharing, making sure we interact. Yeah, strategies to be implemented right away, engagement. Relevance, collaboration. Follow-up for sure. Mhm. Relying on coaching. Great. So I see a lot of people are connecting with this, building relationships. Super. So Learning Forward is they refer to themselves as Learning Forward, the Professional Learning Association. And it is an association whose sole purpose is to help people provide effective professional development. And they have developed a system-wide approach to professional learning that has a framework of these three categories here on the screen. Their recommendations are also visible in responsive classroom offerings. And again, the structure of our professional development can serve as a model for school-led professional development. So in what they mean by rigorous content for each learner is helping understand the student and family context and impact on learning, helping to apply inclusive practices, supporting an implementation of high quality curriculum, and focusing on relevant and role-specific learning. By transformational processes, they believe that all professional development should help leverage inclusive practices, should address bias, assumptions, and beliefs about identity, should help use multiple types of data for planning, design, and implementation, that it should apply change management theories and tools, and support with practice, feedback, and follow-up. And lastly, their conditions for success talk about connecting professional learning to student opportunity. We've talked about that. Help create a vision for achieving goals. That's something that we even did a little bit in the very beginning, where I asked you to choose a focus for this evening. Help maximize resources. That's really important in so many of our schools. Advocate for the adoption of standards for professional learning. Model learning, we see that in responsive classroom on a regular basis. And help embed continuous collaborative learning. So again, so many of these, even if you just look at the adjectives or listen to the describing words here that I'm saying, come back to the idea of engaging, building relationships, connection, providing ways to build belonging, significance, and fun. Responsive classroom incorporates all of these standards that are from Learning Forward into its professional learning, either by addressing it directly or encouraging schools to do so as a positive community. And again, some testimonials that stuck out to me were one from a woman named Jennifer who said, "This will change how you teach and how you feel about teaching in a good way." And another participant named Courtney said, "Very informative with many opportunities to practice what we are learning." So think back to what you jotted down about the professional development that you experienced in the one that I asked you in the beginning, that we had a variety of different ones. And think about what you valued and what of these best practices, standards, and characteristics were present that made you value it so much. So in the example that I shared about the history workshop, it was that sense of belonging that we were able to foster, and that transformational process of being able to grow for ourselves as professionals as well as personally. So you can share one connection in the chat if you are willing. We'd love to see some people's ideas. I always get a little bit impatient when I'm waiting for people to write, but I know that they're just having good ideas. I'm like, I want to see what everyone has to say. Collaboration, again, practice the learning. Leveraging practices, more collaboration. Engaging environment. Yep. Again, a lot about connection here. Engagement. So the big takeaway is nobody wants to just sit there and listen to somebody drone on. I want to make sure that it's meaningful. Just a great to take away these ideas that everybody's sharing about the importance of community. And especially as we have come out of the pandemic and we all are on our screens and so forth, this time to really create community and develop engagement and collaboration is so important. And I know, I'm sure Margie could share as well, but the one thing that teachers asked for the most when I was an administrator was more time to collaborate, more time to work together and to share ideas. So, all right.
Interesting that you
Thank
say
you
that,
for sharing.
as I'm looking at the commonalities here of the chat too, that presenting for Responsive Classroom for the 1 and 4 day workshops, there's always a feedback form at the end that the question is, how could your presenter help you more? And as collaborative as our workshops and courses are, half of the responses are, wish we had more time to collaborate. So it shows the power of collaboration.
Yeah.
I really think people are responding.
And Sharon, thank you for pointing out that, yes, there are great benefits to screens because in some ways it allows us to collaborate more. All right. Whoops. Okay, here we are in the right spot here. So here's another moment to reflect. Think of one practice, not necessarily something we've mentioned, but something you do in your teaching or at your school because it is how you like to learn. So an example is I would often put my students into small groups to discuss or work on something together because I find that I learn even more when I can hear other people's perspectives and approaches to a problem. So what is something else that you might do that maybe it's your go-to whenever I'm planning a lesson or a unit or whatever, I always have them do this. Maybe there's somebody who really incorporates games because that's how they learn, or physical movement because they're really a kinesthetic learner. So go ahead and think of something, a practice that you incorporate in your teaching because that's how you really love to learn. Oh, yeah. And small groups, again, because it's easier for people who might be afraid of speaking in the whole group. That's a great point. Hands-on science. Experience, yep, have to do it to really get it sometimes. Games, turn and talk, such a simple but meaningful interactive learning structure. Great. Getting movement, fun, laughter, pictures, yes. Partner games. That's great. Time to socialize. Giving other people the chance to be the teacher. Maybe there's some administrators on here who are really excited for some of their teachers to be on here so that the teachers will be the professional learning leaders, giving everybody a chance to share their expertise and excitement about things, incorporating music. Great. So, we are going to talk about some specific responsive classroom practices that are effective for learning, but we're going to focus tonight on 3 that are particularly effective in professional learning. And the first one is interactive learning structures. I'm trying to meld my words here. And the use of interactive learning structures in our workshops and courses, of course, fosters engagement around specific content. So you can bring similar interaction and engagement into your own professional development to help adult learners thrive. And these are purposeful activities, not just a free-for-all, that promote maximum learning by being active or hands-on, as a number of you have mentioned, and even a lot of you are mentioning names of interactive learning structures, and interactive, involving collaboration amongst the students, and so therefore actively constructing their knowledge of whatever the topic at hand might be. So for example, in responsive classroom workshops and courses, we often have participants move to pair up, interact with each other about the content, and share back to the group. And there's a book, Energize Your Meetings, which is with an exclamation point at the end. I love that. Energize your meetings, which is amazing. I used it from the moment I got it until I finished being an administrator. I used it on a regular basis because it's full of interactive learning structures suggested for educator professional development. So they've done the hard work of taking responsive classroom interactive learning structures that we use in the classrooms and made them adapted to be used with educators. So anybody who's designing professional development should definitely get that book. If you're leading meetings that are not fully professional development, but might be a little bit more logistical, it's still great to throw some energizers and interactive learning structures into those meetings. Also, this is my plug for the quick coaching guides, which I had not heard of until I started working for Responsive Classroom, because they're sort of in the process of being built up, and we now have a huge library of them, and they are amazing because it's basically, here is a little fold out of great ideas for meetings on particular topics, a way to engage your educators, and they have a lot of different structures. It's basically lesson plans that have already been done for you if you're leading meetings. Super rich in just a few pages. So really efficient way. I encourage you all to check those out if you have not. They use interactive learning structures and make planning, staff development, or teacher development practically effortless. So we'll also share these titles at the end of the webinar in case you missed those names. So another set of practices that we love at Responsive Classroom and incorporate into everything are energizers, is what we call them in elementary school, and brain breaks is what we call them in middle school. So I want you just for a second to consider, just think in your head, how long can you sit and learn in a workshop or even on a webinar before you need to move, check something else, before your brain goes, oh, hold on, I need a little break here. And I often think, like, the way that adults relate to this is, how long can you really focus on something before you're like, oh, I just need to check my phone, or I just need a drink of water, or I just need to go to the bathroom, or I'm just going to use my stand-up desk because I am lucky enough to have one, as opposed to sitting down. There's a lot of ways that our brain is telling us that we need a break that we don't even realize as adults. And as any of you who've been through a Responsive Classroom 4-day course, you have had the experience of understanding all of the brain research and what goes into the idea behind energizers and brain breaks, and how these breaks allow your brain to process the information that they're learning, how important they are for that cognitive functioning. They're key in sustaining engagement. And so they're something that we don't stop needing when we're done with middle school. We still need them. And so any professional development that is done for adults or anybody of any age really should take into consideration how long people can sustain attention before they need to move around, but also just give them a chance to move and engage and do something in a different way, because that will help them learn the material even better. So this is where it's a brain-based approach to sustaining engagement, for those of you who are unfamiliar with them. And teachers punctuate instructional periods with very quick whole group activities that get learners moving, breathing deeply, laughing, thinking, working together. You can have calming ones if you've just done something where people got so engaged that now the energy in the room is a little too much. You might need to do a calming brain break. Or if people are starting to sag a little bit and eyes glaze over, you might need to do an energizing brain break or energizer. Excuse me. In middle school, where we call them brain breaks, they're quick whole class activities that give students a mental and physical break from the rigorous activities that they're doing. And again, for everybody at every age, they're an opportunity to connect through play. And I am a firm believer that as adults, we do not get to play enough. And so anytime that you can bring a little bit of play into your professional development, people will benefit from that, because it is how we all learn from the very beginning of our lives. So an example, and you can, if you can bear with me, I'm going to do an example for you. You can do it with me, of an energizer that I am terrible at. But it's a really quick and easy one to do. So we're going to do it, and I'm going to be vulnerable with you. It's called switch. So place your right hand, and I'm not sure how I appear to you in the mirror, but place your right hand in front of you with your thumb up and your fingers curled in. So a thumbs up. Place your left hand in front of you with your index finger pointing out, like I'm pointing at you, right? And the thumb and the other fingers curled in. And when I call switch, you're going to switch the position of your index fingers and thumb so that the left hand has the thumb up and the right hand has the index finger pointing. Okay. I'm really good at it if I do it that slowly. Switch. I couldn't even do it then. So I'm going to call switch a couple of times. So let's start right thumb, left finger, and switch. And switch. And switch. And switch. Okay, so if you're doing this with a group, you can get faster and faster. I end up falling apart and laughing at myself, but it's really good for your brain to have to think about that coordination. And also firing up your brain in that way helps you process all the information that you've just been learning as well. So it's coordination, concentration, perseverance. I always feel that my perseverance is tested in that brain break. And it can also encourage students or participants, adult participants, to find respectful and encouraging words to use with one another. It's great when, you see a group of people doing it, be they students or adults, and say, "Oh no, you can do it. Oh, you did it that time. Oh, yeah, you were so focused." So yes, and Celeste is saying taking it slow helps too. And that's a really good lesson, that there are some things that we need to really focus on doing correctly so that we can actually get it done and not rush. So sorry, I'm losing my, I've gotten too excited about my switching and lost my mouse there for a minute. Another practice that we use regularly in Responsive Classroom that I think is essential for professional learning is opportunities for questions and feedback. There is nothing worse than having somebody lecture at you and then not be able to ask questions, not be able to know if you've understood it well. So there's no single right or wrong answer to these questions. So the point of an open-ended question is to invite learners in to reflect on what they already know and to wonder about what they don't know, what they might need to learn. The idea is to stretch learners' curiosity, reasoning ability, creativity, independence, and offer also the trainers or the teachers, whomever is doing the leading and the teaching, to assess understanding. So it's helping the learners be able to process their learning at the same time that it's allowing the person who's leading the learning to assess, because the types of questions you get will help you understand where these people are in their journey of understanding and what might need to be retaught or reviewed in some way or clarified, possibly for the whole group. How many of you have had that happen in your classroom where a student asks you a question or answers your question when you're trying to get information from their thought process, and you think, oh, wait a minute, and you look around and you realize, I think I need to clarify this for everybody because this was a misconception. So creating an environment where students and teachers or those participating in professional learning feel that they can be vulnerable in asking questions, where you are inviting questions and saying, you actually need to ask me questions, gives them the opportunity to have that dialogue so that there's a better flow of understanding. In responsive classroom, we often build questions in for either personal connection or closure, reflection questions as well. And both in professional learning and in the classroom, reflection questions and open-ended questions can be key parts of closing circle or closing of the day to wrap things up. And they encourage the learner to think about their learning at a metacognitive level. So you can ask questions, well, how did you come to that answer? What was the process that you went through? So that as a learner is having a chance to understand how they are learning, and then that actually helps them to be a better learner moving forward. And even as we engage in this webinar, I've been asking you to reflect or to connect in your head or on a piece of paper or in the chat, partly as a way to connect, but also to get you to have that reflective process and see where you are with those open-ended questions. So asking a learner, a participant in professional learning, how they figured out something or what their process was is a great way to help them deepen their own learning. It's a great way to connect with them, and it's a great way to get feedback on your own leadership and teaching. So, as a closing reflection, since I just mentioned we're closing reflections, take a couple minutes to think about what is one key insight or takeaway that you have gained from today's webinar. And as you think about that, or before, I will say that many of the practices that we use with students are extremely effective for adult learning. And that's why we model them in responsive classroom and hope that participants will put into action in their own schools for their students as well as their colleagues. And so, just think back to the last chat share about how you're teaching, how you teach the way you need to learn, and then also about these practices that we have just gone through, and see what insight or takeaway has that made for you. Maybe what practice or activity springs up to you. Maybe it's beyond the practice and activity piece. The importance of fun, brain breaks for everybody. Mistakes will happen. Yeah. Yeah, they're best teaching practices that we use in the classroom are best practices for adults too. So true. There are some developmental differences, but those key factors of belonging, significance, and fun are true our whole lives. Learning through play. Brain breaks. Yeah, even just standing up and stretching. Thank you, Sharon. Great. And the importance of inclusivity. I think that's another piece where giving opportunities for reflection, for connection, for those open-ended questions is a great way to be inclusive of everybody without getting into being controversial or not. You're just wanting to hear from each individual person. And that is a way to emphasize how important the significance of each of the people that you work with is. So thank you, Martina. That was a great, oh, I think you shared it just to host and panelists, but she said, let them explain or express being inclusive. So thank you all for those takeaways. Here are the resources that I promised to share with you. This is the book, Energize Your Meetings with the exclamation point, because it's so exciting and we get so engaged. And then also these are just 3 examples of quick coaching guides, and there are many, many of them, and they are lovely, color coordinated for the different areas that you would be using them in. And I just selected a few here to show you the range. Lively learning. So this could apply both for your students and for developing professional development. Inspiring curiosity and wonder through questioning, that goes more deeply into open-ended questions and effective questioning techniques. And joyful gatherings, how to make sure that these gatherings that we are planning, be they meetings or professional development, have an element of joy. Anthony, I'm not going to go back to the slide, but you will get this whole webinar will be emailed to you shortly. You'll get the recording, so you'll be able to go back and watch it and pause right on that slide as you like. So note down these, go onto the website of the bookstore and have a look. The other thing that I want to share with you, a couple of things, is that this is our 3rd in this series. So we have one more to be the 4th webinar that is in July 20th, called Preparing for the First 6 Weeks of School. So it's gearing you up to get right back in the swing of things. I know some of you are probably just ending or have just ended, and you don't want to think about it yet because that's coming too quickly. But it is great to take some time in the summer to think about how are you going to set yourself up for success in those first 6 weeks of school. We often speak with middle school teachers about the first 4 weeks of school. The webinar is really for anybody, but we say the first 6 weeks of school because that includes the first 4 weeks as well. So that's exciting. And then we will have more webinars throughout the year, but that's the last one for this sort of school year, I guess, to kick off next school year. If you are interested in bringing Responsive Classroom to your school and having workshops at your school, you can contact our Educational Partnerships group. If you want to reach out to myself or to Margie, our emails are here as well. We're happy to answer questions. And then I also promised you that I would share the references for the Harvard and Brown study, as well as Learning Forward standards. So there they are. Lastly, there is still time to sign up for summer workshops from Responsive Classroom. So I think, Margie, do you have that link to drop in the chat box, or I might be able to?
I will do that real quick. If
okay,
not, you can go to our website and all the cities are listed there. We have the 4-day workshops. I'm sorry, the 4-day core for elementary and middle school. So let me just drop that in the chat, and definitely
that's
go to our website.
We have opportunities both, I think, for the core course and the advanced course, I believe. And they are both in person and virtual. So any of you who have taken and loved the core course, the first 4 days, should definitely look at the advanced courses, which is the next 4 days of becoming really versed in the responsive classroom approach.
And they might be located close to you or find a way to go somewhere fun, because you never know. You might come to someplace cool like Ohio and enjoy your time there. So we hope that you could join us.
Yeah, so thank you everybody for your participation, for your enthusiasm. You shared some wonderful ideas from each other, which is how we learn the best. And if you would like to share this webinar with anybody else, it will be on the website shortly. And hopefully you'll join us at a workshop or a course in the future, and keep your eyes out for more webinars. Thank you for your enthusiasm, and have a great rest of your day or evening, or there's somebody from Hong Kong, so that's probably the morning of tomorrow for the rest of us. Enjoy. It's great to see everybody from all around the world.
Thank you, everybody.
And have a wonderful summer.
Yeah, thank you.